This is the Olifants River, the central artery of the transboundary Olifants catchment, which spans nearly 55,000 square kilometers. Starting in South Africa's Highveld, the vast river system passes through Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo provinces before washing into the floodplains in Mozambique, and finally into the Indian Ocean. The Olifants and its tributaries support major economic activities and multiple livelihoods along its banks, from large mines and processing plants to being the source of irrigation for commercial and small-scale farmers. Many depend on the river and the surrounding natural resources for survival, but the system is under threat. Unchecked pollution, inappropriate land and resource use, weak and poorly enforced policies and poor protection of biodiversity is degrading the Olifants at an alarming rate. Climate change will further stress the river system. Based on a scenario of high greenhouse gas concentration, a rise of 2 degrees Celsius in surface temperatures is predicted by the middle of the century. Erratic rainfall, increased evaporation, flooding and drought will have a major impact on the catchment and especially the livelihoods of the poor and vulnerable. USAID's Resilience in the Limpopo River Basin program, known as RESILIM, is working to address the ongoing deterioration in the catchment. The Association for Water and Rural Development, AWARD, is the organization implementing the program in South Africa. AWARD adopts a systemic approach to natural resources management, evaluating contributing factors holistically. The organization works with multiple stakeholders, from grassroots to government level, to facilitate dialogue and change. The aim is to reduce vulnerability and build a more resilient set of livelihoods and management practices throughout the catchment.
One of the most serious degradations of South Africa's rivers is actually occurring in the Olifant. So it's quite important that we actually look at managing it properly. And I think the reality is that if we can address the Olifants, we might be able to shed some serious light on how we need to start responding to the other rivers. Because as we know, South Africa is running into serious water deficit, meaning that the demand for water is outstripping the actual availability. And if we don't start addressing that very soon, we're going to find ourselves in a very serious predicament.
Using a diverse suite of tools and methodologies, AWARD adopts a complex systems thinking approach to understand how the whole system works.
So we see the catchment or the river basin as almost a living entity that has got these various components. So if something is going wrong in one point, you actually have to make sure that the negative effect is being experienced actually is originating there, because it might be coming from somewhere else.
This approach means working collaboratively with stakeholders at all levels, from international, national, provincial, and local. AWARD assesses who the relevant stakeholders are in an area and how best to involve them through a process known as social learning.
It requires us to collectively and collaboratively devise potential solutions that are different to the way that you might do it where you're doing it just for yourself. And so a huge part of it is trying to get people to work collaboratively together, emphasizing that that doesn't mean everybody has to hold exactly the same views, but that there's enough commonality that people can devise or draw up or design a collective future.
First of all, you want people to confront the challenge that they're seeing. Is the water polluted? Why is it polluted? What should we do? It's a collaborative process of encountering problems, collaboratively designing interventions, and building agency for people to act on the issues and then act on the issues and reflect, act and reflect.
It's almost like an emergent process. So every time when I engage with stakeholders, I pay attention to what they express in terms of what they need. I also try to observe what the gaps are in their knowledge. And then I go back and I would develop a customized material and approach in the next engagement, trying to address those needs and gaps that I have identified.
The profile of the relevant stakeholders changes throughout the catchment, particularly at the local level.
The upper end of the catchment, you've got a much more urbanised footprint. So it's people living, for example, around Middleburg, Witbank, some of those bigger areas. You move down the catchment, you've got a lot of former Bantustan homeland areas. So you've still got that entrained legacy of apartheid that lives on. And those people tend to be largely rural, quite a lot of subsistence agriculture, quite a lot of dependency on natural resources more directly. So those people are largely in the middle part of the catchment, a lot of mining in that area, probably well over 600 mines in the catchment. Then as you move down, you've got the same sort of patterns being seen down in the Lowveld, quite a lot of commercial agriculture. And then downstream, you've got Kruger of international importance, the Transfrontier Park. And then into Mozambique, we're starting to see again large numbers of rural communities. And Mozambique is quite a different picture in many ways. People don't have social grant services, and people aren't buffered by the same systems we have in South Africa. And then when you move down to the estuary, the river moves through a very vast floodplain around Shasha. And there are estimates in excess probably of 5,000 farmers, small-scale farmers on that floodplain, dependent upon the floods and the receding floods, and obviously on the broader natural resources in the area.
The reality is that those already vulnerable in the catchment will be most affected by the increased degradation of the river system. Many communities have little choice but to use the water, whether it's safe or not.
We don't have water at our own place. We used to wash here. We fetch water to drink here, to cook, to do everything with this water. And this water is not good. Most of people used to throw dirty things inside, like pampas, whatever, dead animals inside the river. So this water is not good and healthy for us. The people, they don't have choice because there is no water. And water is a living thing in our life. We cannot live without water. That's why we used to use this river water.
Degraded water quality is a key concern in the catchment. The numerous mines and processing plants in the upper catchment are having a severe impact on surrounding communities and on those who live downstream.
So this is what is actually not taken care of, because all of that water that flows from here is contaminated. It kills the river basically. And we are at the lower end where it is discharging acid mine drainage with a pH of about 2, equivalent to battery acid. Basically, this water flows 24/7 right straight into the Brakspruit, and from the Brakspruit right down to the Olifants River.
Ill-maintained and defective wastewater treatment plants are also to blame for polluting the river early in its life, and spills have affected many areas, such as Middleburg in Mpumalanga province.
You can see this river is not right, it's not good. So even the animals or the insect cannot live there. There are no species in the water. We used to have frogs and natural animals that have been given by God. But unfortunately, now all of it is gone. So when this particular stream is dead, automatically all the rivers down there, they will be contaminated.
You shouldn't actually allow that to happen. You really need to make sure that you're preserving the water at the top end of the catchment as much as you can, so that the water quality actually stays as high as possible, as well as the dilution potential is maintained.
Fed from the Highveld by the catchment's Klein Olifants, Groot Olifants, and Vilge rivers, Loskop Dam provides a good case study of the negative effects being experienced downstream. The dam is the second biggest irrigation scheme in South Africa, with 22,000 hectares of farmland under irrigation from its water.
This pollution has been going on for many years. So the sediment in the dam has also been contaminated. And with the effect of maybe lower dam levels, you get chemical reactions of water coming in and chemicals in the sediment further pollute the environment. And on the nature reserve itself, we experience many challenges. Fish die-offs from time to time, mass die-offs from time to time. The total crocodile population crashed. There's basically very little crocodiles left in the dam. So there is many direct impacts of the pollution, but of course all the irrigation downstream is dependent on this water that's in the dams.
Water quality issues have impacted commercial farmers getting water from the dam, as they are required to adhere to the Eurogap quality requirements on their export fruit to Europe.
We need quality water. There's not supposed to be E. coli, and that can be a problem, and that can only come from a municipality. The purification works, that doesn't work. We have to send water sampling to the Eurogap people, and there must be a certain levels. Otherwise, they're going to accept it or decline the fruit.
As a result of insufficient rainfall, Loskop Dam is unusually depleted. When water quantity reduces, water quality issues are amplified, and the effects of climate change will make this an increasing reality.
We are starting now to become really concerned around climate change. If climate change patterns are going to cause changes in the flow of that river, by decreasing flows or changing flow regime, we can anticipate that the dilution potential of that river is really going to be lost. And so any discharges of any sort into that river are going to start to become very concentrated.
Many communities are forced to turn to the river and the surrounding natural resources to make a living, driven by the need to provide for their families. Practices such as illegal sand mining and excessive logging are having a detrimental effect on the catchment.
Most of our community now, they are making business out of the river by selling sand, stones, bricks and whatever. That's the main problem that we are having. They are even taking a lot of big holes.
Restoring resilience requires building a sense of stewardship and custodianship over the catchment among all stakeholders, with the ultimate goal to have those most dependent on the natural resources be involved in its management. An example is in the Hlabane, where a ward is facilitating the creation of a co-management agreement between government and traditional authorities to share the running of the Hlabane Nature Reserve. Engaging with traditional leaders and local authorities is essential when it comes to discussions of land use. A ward has worked with the Hlabane Communal Property Association leadership to engage communities.
Hlabane has got many stakeholders. We have the traditional leadership, we have the schools, we have the churches, and all those leaders, if they understand what we want to achieve, it is very simple for the community to understand what should be done.
Engaging with local government and getting their commitment and collaboration is key to the success of RESILIM. A ward has worked closely with local government departments such as the Maruleng Municipality Spatial Planning and Economic Development Unit in Hoedspruit.
That are trying to educate the municipality and also capacitate us in terms of how best can we manage our environment. That is a key component that we need, especially within our Spatial Planning and Economic Development Unit, to ensure that we're balancing these acts of development on one side and protection of the natural environment on the other. So the benefits of working with a ward is that they're able to supplement our existing knowledge pool and our understanding of our environment. Because often as government, we're very limited in terms of our scope of understanding.
RESILIM is currently transitioning from Phase 1 to Phase 2, which means the real work of implementation has begun. Ongoing learning will be combined with implementation of key activities identified in the framework. This will include piloting, testing, and replication of interventions aimed at ensuring that stakeholders at all levels are able to contribute to the improved management of the Olifants catchment.
What would we hope to achieve? We would like to say that we've contributed to a more resilient Olifants catchment. and that it stands as a good example to the other river systems in South Africa and in the region that are coming under the similar or same pressures.